The morning sun slanted through lace curtains, painting pale golden squares on the hardwood floor of the Carr household. William Carr, 66 years old, sat in his favorite chair by the window, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand. His hands were scarred by years of hard work nights on loading docks, days behind machinery, decades of sacrifice he never regretted. Today was Father's Day. For most men in his neighborhood, it meant golf outings or backyard barbecues. For William, it was another reminder of how far his only daughter had drifted away. The doorbell rang just after 9. Jessica, his wife of nearly 4 decades, dried her hands on a towel and peeked through the sidelight window. A delivery truck idled at the curb. The driver carried a medium-sized cardboard box, the kind used for shoes or electronics. He scanned the shipping label with a handheld device, then offered the package with a polite nod. "Happy Father's Day," he said before returning to his truck. Jessica accepted it with hesitation, turning it in her hands. No return address, no identifying marks, just a plain brown surface. She carried it into the living room and set it on the coffee table in front of William. "Maybe Samantha remembered after all," Jessica said softly, though her tone carried more hope than certainty. William stared at the box. His daughter had a talent for remembering occasions only when money was involved. Lately, her calls were always urgent: bills, rent debts, emergencies, never love, never presents. "Strange," he muttered, picking up the package. It was light, almost deceptively so. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, tracing the edges of the cardboard. "William," she whispered. "Don't open it." He frowned. "Why not? Can't you see?" She pointed to the side panel. Tiny perforations, nearly invisible at first glance, dotted the cardboard. Air holes. William's stomach tightened. He set the box down gently as if it might explode. "Breathing holes," he said, his voice flat. Jessica took a cautious step back. "Something's alive in there." The living room suddenly felt smaller, the morning light harsher. William's mind raced through possibilities: an animal, a cruel prank, or something worse. And beneath the fear simmered another thought, one he didn't want to voice aloud. Who would send something like this? The answer pressed against his chest with a cold certainty. Only someone who knew their address, their routines, their vulnerabilities. Only someone who wanted to frighten them, maybe even harm them. The box rustled. A faint hiss leaked from inside, sharp and real. Jessica gasped and gripped William's arm, her nails biting through the fabric of his shirt. "Call someone," she whispered. William's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his voice remained steady. "We need the police," he said. As Jessica moved to lock the front door, William kept his eyes fixed on the box. The hiss faded into silence, but the dread did not. Whatever was inside was alive and waking up. The police hadn't arrived yet. The package still sat on the coffee table like a predator crouching in plain sight, silent but menacing. William tried to push the sound of hissing out of his mind, but Jessica's grip on his arm reminded him of its reality. Then, almost as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, the front door opened without warning. Samantha stood framed in the doorway, her hair perfectly styled, her designer purse swinging from her shoulder. Behind her loomed Peter, tall, broad-shouldered, his grin sharp with smug confidence. "Happy Father's Day," Samantha announced, though her voice carried no warmth. "We thought we'd stop by since you never bother visiting us." Jessica stiffened. "You don't just stop by, Samantha. You barge in." Peter ignored her. His eyes landed on the box and then slid back to William. "Well, well. Looks like someone cares enough to send you a present. Maybe it's a sign you should share the wealth a little more generously, old man." The word stung not for its reminder of age, but for its casual disrespect. William's jaw tightened. "It's not your concern what comes to this house." Samantha tossed her purse onto the couch and folded her arms. "Everything in this house is my concern. You act like the money you've saved all these years belongs only to you. But who suffered alongside you while you worked those 12-hour shifts, Mom? And who deserves security now that you're retired? Your family. Me." Jessica bristled. "You're not suffering, Samantha. You're spending. There's a difference." Samantha's face darkened. You think I don't see how you cling to those accounts like trophies, Dad? You could change our lives with one signature. Yet here you sit clutching papers like they're worth more than your daughter." William's voice was low but steady. "They're worth more because they represent work. Decades of it. Every dollar in that account is sweat sacrifice and pain. Pain you'll never understand because you've never had to fight for respect in a world determined to deny it." Peter scoffed, lounging on the arm of the sofa. "Oh, here we go. The sob story about race again. Newsflash. Well, nobody cares anymore. Everyone's got problems." William's chest tightened. He'd heard words like that before from supervisors who overlooked him, from loan officers who dismissed him, from neighbors who crossed the street rather than greet him. To hear it now in his own living room from the man who'd married his daughter, it cut deeper than he expected. Jessica stepped between them, her voice urgent. "Enough. This is supposed to be a family day, not a battlefield." But the battlefield was already drawn. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes cold. "You're sitting on hundreds of thousands while we're drowning. And you're telling me your pride is more important than your daughter's survival?" William glanced at her handbag, her polished nails, the glinting jewelry on her wrist. Her survival looked nothing like desperation. It looked like entitlement. "My pride," he said, his voice hard, "is the only thing I have left that hasn't been stolen by people who think they're better than me because of my skin. And I'll be damned if I hand that over, too." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. The only sound was the faint, sinister rustle from the box on the coffee table. Peter broke the silence with a mocking laugh. "Man, you really believe you're some martyr, don't you? Let me tell you something. Well, if you don't learn how to play ball, life will eat you alive. And from the looks of it, it already has." William rose slowly, his knees aching but his stance firm. He pointed toward the door. "Get out!" Samantha's lips curled in disbelief. "You can't kick us out. This house is as much mine as yours." "Not today," William said. His voice didn't tremble. "Not ever again." Behind him the box hissed once more, long and sharp, as though punctuating his words. After the door slammed behind Samantha and Peter, silence pressed against the walls of the car home. Jessica busied herself in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she rinsed already clean dishes. William remained in the living room, staring at the box on the coffee table. The hiss had gone quiet again, but its memory echoed in his ears. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion seeping into his bones. The confrontation had ripped open scars he thought had long since healed. He closed his eyes and drifted backward through decades. He saw himself at 25 standing in line at the steel mill with a hard hat tucked under his arm. The supervisor, a stocky man with thin lips, glanced at William's application before shaking his head. "We're not hiring colored boys for management," he'd said flatly. "Floor work only." William had swallowed the insult and taken the job. 12-hour shifts, grime embedding itself into his pores, lungs, raw from the dust. Every promotion he earned came slower than it should have, his efforts always measured against men who looked different. He remembered the sting of sitting through meetings where his ideas were ignored until repeated by white colleagues, then praised. Years later, when he applied for a loan to buy this very house, the banker looked at his address in a predominantly black neighborhood and shook his head. High risk, he'd said, even though William's credit was solid. Only after Jessica's white co-worker co-signed did the papers move forward. William had signed the deed with pride, but also with bitterness. Now he sat in that same house listening to his daughter echo the dismissive voices he'd battled his whole life. What did I work for if not to protect her from this world, he thought, and still she chooses to side with the very contempt I fought against. Jessica returned quietly, drying her hands on a towel. "You're far away again," she said softly. William opened his eyes. "Just remembering." "Don't," she whispered. "It only hurts you." "But it explains her," he replied. "She never saw it. The doors closed in my face, the words thrown like stones. She grew up with the benefits, not the battles. Maybe she thinks the money appeared by magic." Jessica sat across from him, her eyes full of worry. "She thinks you owe her, because she's never had to fight for anything. She doesn't understand what it cost you." William's gaze drifted to the window. Across the street, the Hendersons' white middle class were unloading groceries, their children laughing as they carried bags. He remembered the early years when those same neighbors crossed the street to avoid him, when Jessica's casseroles went uneaten because we don't trust food from them. Over time, smiles replaced suspicion, but the memory lingered. And now his own daughter mirrored that disdain. "She's forgotten who she is," William said bitterly. "Forgotten who we are. She'd rather stand with Peter and his mockery than with the man who carried her on his shoulders through every storm." Jessica's voice cracked. "She's still our daughter." William shook his head. "She's someone else now, someone I don't recognize." The box rustled again, pulling them both back to the present. Jessica's breath hitched, and William forced himself to focus. Whatever was inside was still alive, still waiting. He rose and placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "The police will be here soon," he said. "Until then, we don't move it. We don't touch it." But even as he spoke, he knew the real danger wasn't in the box. It was in the growing chasm between him and the child he had once believed he could protect from the world's cruelty, only to discover she had embraced it herself. The police sirens were still distant, faint wails threading through the Sunday quiet. William sat rigid in his chair, his eyes fixed on the box. Jessica hovered near the doorway, torn between fear of what lay inside and fear of what their daughter had become. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. William's chest tightened when he saw the caller ID Samantha. He hesitated before answering, pressing the speaker button so Jessica could hear. Her voice spilled out, sharp and accusing. "Dad, what did you do? Peter said you threw us out like we're strangers. You humiliated us in front of the neighbors." William's hand curled into a fist. "You humiliated yourself, Samantha. I told you I'm not your bank." Her voice cracked, slipping into the shrill pitch he'd come to recognize, the pitch that preceded every demand. "If you won't help me, then you don't get to see Emma and Jake anymore. They're my children, and I decide who they spend time with." Jessica gasped. "Samantha, no, don't drag the children into this." But Samantha barreled on. "You love them, don't you? Then prove it. Help us out. Just a few thousand. That's nothing compared to what you've got tucked away." William's throat felt tight, but his voice came out steady. "You're holding my grandchildren hostage. Do you hear yourself?" "They're not hostages," Samantha snapped. "They're leverage. Maybe it's the only way to make you understand what family means." Her words cut deeper than any insult Peter had ever thrown. William's vision blurred memories, flooding Emma's gap-toothed smile when she hugged him after her first piano recital, Jake's small hand gripping his as they walked through the park. Innocence, trust, love, and now all of it twisted into currency. Jessica's voice broke with desperation. "Samantha, please, don't do this. They need their grandparents. They need food on the table," Samantha shot back. "They need a roof over their heads." "You think lectures about hard work are going to pay our bills?" William drew in a slow breath. "Your bills are not my responsibility." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted low, dangerous. "If you won't choose us, then you've chosen money over family. Don't expect forgiveness." The line went dead. The silence that followed felt heavier than the box on the table. Jessica pressed trembling fingers to her lips, her eyes wide with grief. "She can't mean it," she whispered. "She wouldn't really keep them from us." William looked down at the silent phone, the reflection of his weary face in its dark screen. "She would. She already has." Jessica's tears spilled over. "We can't lose them, William. They're all we have left of her." But William felt something shift inside him, a cold clarity that refused to bend. If she teaches them that love is a bargaining chip, then maybe losing them is better than letting them grow up believing family is just another transaction. The sirens grew louder, closer. Outside, a cruiser slowed at the curb. But inside the car home, the true emergency was already unfolding, the unraveling of blood ties replaced by threats and manipulation. William rose slowly, his knees stiff but his back straight. "Let the police handle the box," he said quietly. "I'll handle the rest." Jessica turned to him, eyes searching. "And what does that mean?" William's gaze hardened. "It means I won't be blackmailed by my own child. Not with money, not with my grandchildren." The knock at the door startled them both. But even before William opened it to the uniformed officers, he knew the most dangerous battle wasn't in the package. It was in the war for his family's soul. The two officers entered with careful steps, their uniforms crisp, their eyes alert. One introduced himself as Officer Reeves, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. William gestured toward the coffee table, where the box sat under a shaft of sunlight like an intruder caught in the act. Reeves crouched, pulling on latex gloves. His flashlight beam swept over the cardboard, pausing on the tiny punctures along the side. Breathing holes, he confirmed his voice calm but firm. "Something's alive in there." Jessica flinched, pressing a hand to her chest. "Can you hear it?" As if on cue, a rustle came from inside the box. Then a low hiss, longer and louder than before. William felt the sound reverberate through his bones. Reeves stood slowly, his hand moving to the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47, requesting animal control. Possible reptile delivery." The words reptile delivery landed like stones in William's gut. His mind flashed back to last month's credit card statement, an odd charge from a store he didn't recognize, Reptile Palace. Samantha had brushed it off as school supplies for the kids. He hadn't believed her then, but he'd let it go. Now the truth pressed against the cardboard in his living room. Jessica caught his eye, her face pale. She knew what he was thinking. "Who would send us something like this?" Officer Reeves asked, glancing up. William hesitated, his throat dry. His instinct was to protect Samantha, to shield her even from suspicion. But the pieces were aligning too neatly, the argument, the threats, the timing. And Peter's smug smile the last time they'd been here. Before he could speak, the box shuddered. The hiss turned into a furious rattle, as if whatever was inside sensed the tension in the room. Jessica gasped and stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the sofa. "Stay calm," Reeves said, his voice steady. "Don't touch it. Animal control will be here in 20 minutes. William's hands trembled, but not from the snake. It was rage, thick and heavy, rising from a place deep inside him. He had spent decades shielding his family from the cruelty of the outside world, from bosses who called him boy, from banks that judged his worth by his skin. Now cruelty had walked straight into his living room, wrapped in cardboard and sealed with tape, and the hand that delivered it might belong to his only daughter. He looked at the box, listening to the angry hiss echo through the house, and whispered to himself, "God help us, if I'm right." The front door opened again, and a man in khaki coveralls stepped in, carrying a reinforced carrier and a long hook pole. His truck outside bore the county logo for animal control. He introduced himself briskly as Mike Johnson, his voice calm but efficient, like someone accustomed to danger. "Which one's the package?" he asked. Officer Reeves pointed toward the coffee table. The box gave a violent shudder, followed by a sharp hiss that made Jessica stumble backward. Mike approached, slowly crouched, and pressed his ear to the side. The sound inside was unmistakable. "Snake," he said. "Non-venomous from the sound of it. But let's be careful." With practiced hands, he slid the box into a large plastic tub, securing the lid tight. Then he used a utility knife to slice open the cardboard. Inside, coiled around itself, was a 3-foot corn snake, its scales a pattern of copper and red. It flicked its tongue at the sudden light. "Beautiful specimen," Mike muttered, transferring it gently into the secure carrier. "Someone paid good money for this one." Jessica clasped her hands to her mouth. "Someone sent us a snake." Officer Reeves nodded grimly. "And on Father's Day, no less. This wasn't an accident. Whoever sent it wanted you scared." William stared at the empty box, his mind replaying the credit card statement, Samantha's voice demanding money. Peter's smug grin. The pieces fit too neatly, too cruelly. Mike snapped the carrier shut. "We'll relocate it to a rescue center. The animal's fine. But the intent here..." He looked at Reeves. "That's another matter." Reeves turned to William. "Do you have any idea who might have done this? Any conflicts, disagreements?" William swallowed hard. His instinct was to deny, to shield his daughter from suspicion. But the memory of Peter's laughter, the sneer in his voice when he called William old man, clung to him like smoke. Jessica's hand slipped into his, her grip trembling. He knew she was thinking the same name he was, but neither of them spoke it aloud. Not yet. Reeves studied William's silence, his eyes narrowing slightly. He'd seen it before, the hesitation of family members who wanted to protect their own, even when the truth was poisoning them. "We'll file a report," the officer said evenly. "But if you think of anything, Mr. Carr, you need to tell us, because a stunt like this, it can escalate." As the snake was carried out of the house, William felt no relief. The danger had been removed from the box, but not from his life. What coiled in the shadows of his family was far more venomous than any reptile. The police and animal control vehicles pulled away, leaving behind the faint smell of disinfectant and a silence so heavy it seemed to press down on the walls. Jessica lingered near the window arms folded tightly across her chest. William stood at the mantel, staring at a faded photograph of Samantha as a child, her gap-toothed smile, her arms wrapped around his neck. He picked up the phone. For a long moment, he only stared at her name on the screen. Then, with a resolve that surprised even him, he pressed call. The line rang twice before her voice answered bright and artificial. "Dad, happy Father's Day." "Did you get my gift?" William froze. His throat clenched. Jessica's eyes widened. "Did you get my gift? What gift are you talking about?" His tone was flat, almost mechanical. "The box," Samantha said, quickly, too quickly. "I just wanted to surprise you. Thought you'd, like it." The words twisted in his ears. Jessica covered her mouth, horrified. But before William could respond, another sound bled through the receiver. A low, satisfied chuckle. Peter. It wasn't the laugh of a man hearing new information. It was the laugh of someone savoring a private joke. Someone who believed he'd gotten away with it. William's stomach turned. In that single sound, doubt shattered. The snake hadn't come from strangers. It had come from his daughter and the man she'd chosen over her own family. He forced his voice steady. "Interesting morning, actually. A strange delivery. Can't say I expected that." Samantha rushed to fill the silence. "Oh, well, if there was a problem I didn't know. Peter said it would be harmless, just a little joke." There it was. Not a denial, not even surprise, just justification. Jessica's knees buckled, and she sank onto the sofa. William closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself against a wave of anger so sharp it left him trembling. "A joke," he repeated slowly. "Sending a live snake into your parents' home. That's your idea of a joke." Her voice cracked into defensiveness. "You're overreacting, Dad. We just wanted you to lighten up. You're always so serious about money, about everything." Peter's chuckle came again, faint but poisonous, curling through the line. William ended the call before his fury could spill over. He set the phone down carefully, as though it were fragile glass, and stared at Jessica. "They did it," he said. His voice was hollow. "Our daughter did this." Jessica's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. "How could she?" William didn't answer, because the real question was darker, heavier. What kind of father had he been that his own child could think cruelty was a gift? The house was quiet that evening, but it wasn't peace. It was the stillness after a battlefield has emptied, when the smoke lingers and the wounds remain. William sat in his study, the glow of the computer screen illuminating the leather-bound portfolio that held decades of financial records. He spread them out across the desk bank, statements, credit card bills, canceled checks. Evidence of a lifetime of sacrifice. Evidence of how thoroughly Samantha had learned to exploit him. Every page carried memories, the $5,000 check to cover her emergency medical bill that turned out to be a gambling debt, the monthly transfers to cover her rent after she and Peter moved into their apartment, the automatic payments for her car insurance, her gym membership, even her subscription to some luxury clothing service she claimed was necessary for mental health. 30 years of enabling disguised as love. His hands calloused from decades of labor hovered over the keyboard. He logged into his bank account. The list of authorized users appeared, and there was Samantha's name granted access back when she was a college student who needed emergency help. What had been temporary had metastasized into entitlement. "Remove authorized user," the screen asked. William stared at the words, feeling a lifetime of guilt pressing against him. He thought of Samantha's face as a child, the way she once clung to his leg when he came home from late shifts. He thought of the laughter in her voice back then, untainted by greed. But he also thought of today, the snake in the box, Peter's mocking chuckle, Samantha's voice justifying cruelty as a joke. His cursor hovered only a moment before he clicked confirm. The system prompted, "Changes will take effect within 1 business hour." Next, he updated the PIN numbers. For years, Samantha had known them watching memorizing. He replaced them with the year of his marriage to Jessica, a number rooted in loyalty and love, not exploitation. Then came the automatic payments. Each cancellation was like cutting a tether: rent canceled, insurance canceled, gym membership canceled. With every click he felt lighter, as if the weight of decades was peeling off his shoulders. Jessica appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes steady. "What are you doing?" "Ending it," William said without turning. His voice carried a calm finality. "I've let her control us for too long. I've let her treat me like an ATM because I was afraid of losing her. But what we have now isn't a daughter. It's a parasite." Jessica winced at the word but didn't argue. She stepped into the room and laid a hand on his shoulder. "Are you sure William clicked the final button? Save changes." A confirmation box flashed across the screen. He exhaled slowly, the breath rattling in his chest. "I've never been more sure." Outside, the neighborhood moved in its usual rhythm. Neighbors grilling dinner, children riding bikes, families laughing in the dusk. For the first time in years, William felt like he wasn't living in constant reaction to Samantha's demands. He had taken back his ledger, and with it, his dignity. The next morning, William and Jessica sat in a downtown office that smelled faintly of leather and old paper. The polished oak desk between them belonged to Margaret Summers, their attorney of 15 years. Her graying hair was pulled into a neat bun, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. She had drafted their wills, handled their property deeds, and settled Jessica's mother's estate. But today, her steady hands would be asked to do something heavier. Margaret listened quietly as William explained, his voice measured but iron hard. The inheritance fight, the endless financial bailouts, the snake in the package, the threats on his doorstep. He spoke without flourish, just the brutal sequence of facts. Jessica added details where his voice faltered, her words trembling with grief. When he finished, Margaret leaned back her pen, tapping softly against the legal pad. "William, Jessica, this is no longer a family disagreement. What you're describing qualifies as harassment, intimidation, and possibly criminal endangerment." Jessica's eyes flicked downward. Even now, the word criminal attached to her daughter hurt. Margaret's voice softened. "You've spent years protecting Samantha, but it's clear she has crossed a line. You need legal protections in place. Immediately." "What kind?" William asked. "Two fronts," Margaret replied crisply. "First, your estate. We restructure your will so Samantha and Peter cannot touch a cent. Instead, we create a trust and educational fund for Emma and Jake. Every dollar earmarked for their schooling, their books, their futures. Managed by an independent trustee. That way your grandchildren are secure, but your daughter has no access." Jessica's lips parted, a faint glimmer of hope cutting through her grief. "So the children will still be cared for?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed. "But Samantha and Peter will not be able to manipulate or mismanage it. They'll be legally barred." William exhaled slowly, as if a weight lifted from his chest. "Good. That's what I want." "And second?" he asked. Margaret flipped to a new page. "A restraining order. Filed today. It will prohibit Samantha and Peter from approaching your home, contacting you directly, or using intimidation. Any violation becomes a matter for law enforcement, not private confrontation." Jessica's hand trembled in William's. "That will tear the family apart." William looked at her, his gaze steady but kind. "Jess, it already is. The law just makes it official." Margaret studied them both, then spoke with the calm finality of someone who had shepherded countless families through storms. "It's not cruelty. It's boundaries. And boundaries are sometimes the only way to preserve what's left." William nodded. For the first time in decades, he felt he was no longer reacting to Samantha's chaos. He was setting the rules. "Do it," he said. "Both." Margaret picked up her pen, and with each stroke of ink, the Carr family's future shifted away from manipulation towards something stronger, something protected. 2 days later, the doorbell rang just after lunch. William and Jessica weren't home to hear it. They had taken Margaret's advice and gone for a walk in the park, a rare moment of peace. But at an apartment across town, Samantha flung open her door to find a uniformed court officer standing on the threshold. "Ms. Carr?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Yes." He held out a thick envelope. "You've been served." Behind her, Peter emerged from the living room, a half-empty beer bottle in hand. "What's this?" The officer didn't explain. He didn't need to. He simply turned and walked away, his duty finished. Samantha tore the seal open with shaking fingers. Her eyes scanned the words, her lips moving as she read. Restraining order. Prohibited contact. Estate modification. Trust fund for minors. Her breath hitched. "He cut us out," she whispered. "Completely." Peter grabbed the papers, scanning quickly, his face tightening with each line. "This can't be legal. It's ironclad." Samantha said, her voice rising in panic. "Margaret Summers. He used Margaret Summers. She knows all his accounts. She's been their lawyer forever." Peter slammed the envelope down on the counter. "So what he thinks he can just erase us. He thinks some piece of paper is going to stop us." But even as he spoke, his bravado rang hollow. Samantha knew her father well enough to recognize the finality in his actions. This wasn't a temporary punishment. This was permanent. For the first time, she felt the ground shift beneath her. The money she had counted on, the safety net she had weaponized, was gone, and with it went her leverage. Back at the Carr home, Jessica and William sat at the kitchen table as the phone rang. It was Margaret. "It's done," she said simply. "They've been served. The restraining order is active. The will is modified. From this point forward, any violation is a matter for the courts." Jessica let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. William nodded, his voice steady. "Thank you, Margaret." When he hung up, he looked across the table at Jessica. Her eyes were wet, but her expression was resolute. "She'll hate us for this," Jessica said softly. William reached across the table, taking her hand. "She already does, but at least now she can't hurt us anymore." And for the first time in years, the words didn't feel like a wish. They felt like the truth. Sunday morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of Mount Olive Baptist Church, scattering colors across the pews. William hadn't been there in months, but today he felt drawn back. Not for ritual, but for grounding. The choir's voices swelled, filling the sanctuary with a kind of strength he hadn't realized he was missing. After the service, he lingered near the fellowship hall, a paper cup of coffee in hand as old friends and neighbors came by to greet him. "You've been quiet, Brother Carr," said Deacon Harris, his grip firm on William's shoulder. "What's weighing on you?" William hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "My daughter. She's turned against me, against us." The deacon's eyes softened. Children stray, but when they raise their hand against their own blood, that's a wound deeper than most. Others gathered, men and women who had known William since his 20s. They listened as he shared pieces of the story, the endless financial demands, the threats, the snake in the box. When he finished, the room was silent. Finally, Sister May shook her head. "That man she married, he don't respect you. Don't respect your history. I seen the way he talks to you. Like you're nothing but a wallet. That's not marriage, that's control." Her words rang true. William thought of Peter's sneer, the way he dismissed every mention of struggle, every reminder of what it meant to be a black man who had clawed his way into middle-class stability. "You carried the weight for decades," Deacon Harris said, "and don't forget you carried it while fighting battles she'll never understand. You faced racism in the workplace, in the bank, in the street. You shielded her from it. Maybe too well. Now she takes for granted the cost of your fight." William swallowed hard. "So what do I do now?" "Stand firm," Harris replied. "You've given her chance after chance. Sometimes love is letting go so they can see themselves clearly without your protection." Later, as William and Jessica walked home through their quiet suburban street, he noticed the difference in how neighbors greeted him. Some smiled warmly, offering small nods of respect. Others, the Hendersons for instance, gave curt acknowledgments, their expressions unreadable. He couldn't tell if it was judgment or discomfort. "Still the same old story," William murmured. Jessica looked at him. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the houses, the manicured lawns, the people who lived behind tidy doors. They'll talk about family values, but when it's us, when it's a black family, suddenly it's dysfunction, bad parenting failure. They never see the centuries behind the choices we're forced to make. Jessica squeezed his hand. Let them think what they want. We know the truth. William nodded, though the weight on his shoulders remained. He had spent a lifetime fighting the world's prejudices. Now he was fighting his own daughter's betrayal. And sometimes it was hard to tell which wound cut deeper. The study smelled faintly of old books and furniture polish. William sat at his desk with a fountain pen in hand, a blank sheet of stationery before him. The house was quiet. Jessica had gone to bed early, but William couldn't sleep. His thoughts circled back to Emma and Jake. They were too young to understand the storm raging around them. Too young to know how their mother wielded them like weapons in her battles. Too young to know what poison can seep into a family when love becomes a bargaining chip. So he began to write. Dear Emma and Jake, by the time you read this, you'll be older. Maybe in high school, maybe preparing for college. Maybe you'll already have questions about why you didn't see us as often as you wanted, or why your mother seemed angry whenever our names came up. I want you to know the truth, not her version, not the twisted stories she'll tell, but the truth from your grandfather's hand. The words came slowly at first, then poured like water breaking through a dam. I grew up in a world that didn't want me to succeed. At work, I was called boy long after I was a man. At banks, I was told I was too risky, though I had done everything right. Every inch of progress I made came at a cost, and every choice I made was to shield your mother from those same battles. He paused, the pen trembling slightly. He thought of Samantha as a child, her laughter echoing through the park, her small hand wrapped around his finger. I gave her everything I could. But somewhere along the way, she began to believe that money was proof of love. She forgot the lessons about dignity, about self-respect, about never letting the world define your worth by what you can take instead of what you can give. His chest tightened, but he pressed on. That is why I made a choice. The inheritance I worked for will not go to your mother or to Peter. It will go to you, not as cash for them to misuse, but as an education fund. A key to doors that should never be closed to you because of your name, your skin, or your circumstances. You will walk through those doors with the confidence that you earned it and with the knowledge that your grandparents believed in you. Tears blurred his vision. He set the pen down, rubbed his eyes, then picked it up again. Don't let anyone convince you that love is measured in dollars. Love is sacrifice. Love is truth. And sometimes love means saying no, even when it breaks your heart. He signed his name, slowly, firmly. Your grandfather, William Carr. Folding the letter carefully, he placed it in an envelope and tucked it inside the manila folder where Margaret had stored the trust documents. He knew the children wouldn't read it for years. But when they did, they would know exactly where he stood and why. When William turned off the lamp, the room was dark, but he felt lighter than he had in decades. For the first time, he wasn't just cutting ties. He was passing on a legacy. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Days passed with no phone calls, no pounding at the door, no text messages filled with threats or guilt. The silence should have been a gift, but Jessica carried it like a weight. She sat at the kitchen table one evening, her teacup cradled in both hands. William joined her, settling into the chair across from her. The clock ticked softly on the wall, the sound filling the space where Samantha's voice used to echo. She hasn't tried to call, Jessica whispered. William shook his head. Not since the papers were served. Jessica's eyes glistened. Do you think she hates us? She hates the boundaries, William said. She hates not having control. But hate and love, he sighed, staring into his coffee. Sometimes they get tangled until you can't tell one from the other. Jessica's voice trembled. I keep remembering her when she was little, the burnt toast she made me on Mother's Day, the crayon drawings of us holding hands. How did we get from there to— This William didn't answer right away. He thought of the long years when Samantha had been shielded from the world's sharp edges. Maybe in protecting her from racism, from struggle, from scarcity, he had also kept her from understanding the value of resilience. Maybe she had learned to demand instead of endure. She grew up in a house where we gave her everything he finally said. And somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing it as love and started seeing it as her right. Jessica's tears slipped down her cheeks. I don't want to lose her, William. You haven't lost her, he said gently. You've lost the version of her that you thought she was. The real Samantha. She has to find herself now, without our money, without our protection. Jessica's hands trembled as she set her cup down. And what if she never does? William reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Then we live with the silence. Better silence than chaos. Better peace than constant war. The room grew still again. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the street, and a neighbor's porch light flickered on. Jessica squeezed his hand. You think the children will ever understand? One day, William said quietly, when they're older, when they see the difference between manipulation and love. The silence returned, but this time William didn't flinch from it. Silence was a cost, but it was also a boundary, and for the first time in decades, he was willing to pay it. The car home sat quiet in the golden light of late afternoon. The curtains swayed gently with the summer breeze, carrying in the scent of cut grass from the neighborhood lawns. For once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. William and Jessica sat together on the porch, 2 mugs of tea warming their hands. The world around them moved on. The Henderson children pedaled their bicycles down the street. Mrs. Patterson watered her begonias, and a pair of teenagers laughed as they tossed a football across the yard. Normal life, ordinary and unremarkable. Jessica leaned against William's shoulder. It feels strange, she admitted, like we're waiting for the next storm. William nodded. Maybe there will be storms, but they won't come through our front door unless we open it. She tilted her head toward him. Do you think she'll come back? He stared across the street, watching the children laugh. If she does, it has to be different. No more threats, no more lies. If she wants a relationship, it will be on the truth, not on my wallet. Jessica's eyes softened. And if she never changes? Then we live like this, William said. Peace isn't something we beg for, it's something we claim, and today I'm claiming it. They sat in silence for a while, sipping their tea, the porch boards creaking under their rocking chairs. William thought of Emma and Jake. The trust fund was secure, their futures untouchable by the chaos of their parents. One day, the children would understand that their grandparents had not abandoned them. They had protected them in the only way they could. Jessica reached for his hand. You've done the right thing, she whispered. William squeezed her fingers gently. Not the easy thing, but the right one. The sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in hues of orange and violet. William closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For years his life had been dictated by fear, fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear of losing his daughter. But fear no longer ruled him. He hadn't found forgiveness yet. That might take years, but he had found something else. Peace. And it didn't need Samantha's permission to last.